What's going on, guys? It's Ash. If you're looking for insight from one of the best NFT traders that we've seen, well, you've come to the right place because today we have Cirrus on with us. Not only is Cirrus one of the better NFT traders that's in the entire space, he also runs his own group. It's called Wumbo. I'm going to introduce him so we can get him on and we will talk about everything NFT related. So let's get it going. Cirrus, what's up, dude? I'm glad to have you on. What's going on?
Nothing much, man. I'm stoked to be here and talk about whatever we want to talk about. Web3, NFTs, trading, whatever it may be.
First thing that we're going to start with is an intro about you. Obviously, you're one of like the top traders, at least like from my perspective, but also probably from like a profit and loss perspective as well, that you've made, a good amount of money flipping NFTs. So why don't you give like a little intro about yourself, how you got into NFTs, when did you start trading, and all that kind of stuff.
Sweet. Yeah. So I guess I'll start with in 2017 was the first time I ever bought my first crypto. My sister was a part of one of the founding members of blockchain at Berkeley, which is like a big blockchain, one of the first big blockchain groups at a university. And she kind of like filled me in on everything that was going on. So I was like, why don't I throw some of my beer money into this and see what happens? And then long story short, like rode the 2017 wave. I was like, oh my God, everything 10x, and kind of like gambled my money away in the ICO bubble.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily, that wasn't much. It was just like me playing around with some money on the side in college. And then kind of just didn't really look at crypto for a few years or a couple years until 2020. Um, and I started realizing like, okay, this stuff's going on a run again. Everybody's at home. There's like a real thesis here for why this thing should run. So I kind of like got back into it, mostly buying ETH, like with again like beer money pretty much. And I was working as a intern as a front end developer for a startup at the time. So just like taking portions of my paycheck and throwing it into ETH. Um, and then I stumbled upon Top Shot, NBA Top Shot in early 2021. I'm a big basketball guy, so I was like, okay, let me see if I can get into here and like try to value these things. Like I feel like I would have a good grasp on being able to value these basketball cards. So I went in and I was like, oh, this is awesome. Like a super quick liquidity for basketball cards. Like you don't have to wait to like go anywhere and get the card graded, and you don't have to worry about your cards getting like messed up or the quality being bad or buying a fake. That's when I was like, okay, I kind of get it. Um, so threw a couple thousand into Top Shot. Everything kind of in February, like things just went crazy. This was like a big moment for NFT adoption was when Top Shot kind of took off, mostly because like anytime like any type of financial instrument or something like goes crazy, it tends to blow up everywhere. And there was like a mass influx of users on Top Shot. It was like on ESPN and all this stuff. And I saw the 2000 turn to like 20, 30,000. And then I saw it was super euphoric. I was like, holy shit, I'm actually making some money for once. And then it slowly started to just deflate and go right back down to the 2000 that it was. I didn't take any profits along the way. I was like, every card that I would sell, I would use the funds to buy another card, and eventually got stuck with a big bag of illiquid NBA Top Shot moments. So after that, I was kind of bitter and a lot. But the thing that came from it was like a lot of the people that I met in the Top Shot community, they moved over to OpenSea, and at the time, I was like, "There's no way! Like, I'm not spending money on these freaking like JPEGs that like there's no intrinsic value, like there's no real organization like the NBA behind them." I just didn't do enough. I didn't see it at the time, and I didn't do enough research. So a lot of my friends went on to mint Bored Apes. I watched them do that. I thought it was stupid. I was also very bitter after watching all my potential profit like disappear in front of my eyes. So NFTs had a bad taste in my mouth. But then from like May or like April to the summer, like late June, early July, I like apes went from the point oh 0.08 mint until I think it was 15 or 20 ETH at the time, and that's when I was like, all right, well, I missed apes. I can't like afford an ape now. Maybe I should jump into this. Like maybe there's actually something here. So then I finally moved over to OpenSea and started buying like little derivatives of CryptoPunks and derivatives of Cool Cats and that type of thing, getting a feel for how everything works. And That's where the OpenSea journey started. And like after I made my first successful derivative CryptoPunk flip, I made like $300 in an hour or something, and I was like, "Oh my god, like this is crazy." So once that happened, I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna fucking." I was working from home, and I was like, "I'm just gonna devote a bunch of time to this and learn whatever I can and what makes things sell. Why do people like traits? Like, how do I catch on to the next early project? Whatever." So from there, I just started like really well. I guess in the beginning, I wasn't as careful because I was buying a derivative crypto punk project called Lil Baby Fast Food Punks and or something like that, or like Baby Fast Food Punks. And after I made my first successful flip for $300, I woke up the next morning and the entire collection was delisted from OpenSea. And like everyone in the Discord was like, "Oh my god, I lost everything I had in here. Like, what do I do?" After I saw that happen, I was like, "Okay, I see what's going on here. Like, you have to be way more careful than like even buying shit coins. Like these things can go to zero way quicker than any other thing I've ever like played with." So from that moment, I was like, "Okay, I need to find something that doesn't look like it's gonna like go to zero overnight and has good volume so that I can do this trait flipping thing at like a grander scale, I guess, in a safer model." So then I found Lazy Lions, and long story short, like I figured it out over there and turned like zero point 0.6 ETH into like I don't know 80 or 90 ETH over the course of two to 3 months, and um, yeah,
And
and then I eventually moved to Mutants. Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, and so that was just by flipping lazy lions.
Yeah, primarily, yeah, I wasn't messing because of my experience with the little baby thing. I was just like, I'm not gonna try to fix something that isn't broken. Like, I'm just gonna stick to this collect. Like, I would see all these other things minting. Like, I saw Doodles mint. I saw like um, a couple other hot mints during the time that I just had like zero interest in touching because I was just like so scarred from seeing people who I was in a Discord with like lose all their money. I was like, I'm just gonna stick to what's working and not like I also like FOMO'd into the Blute thing and the Creature World thing and got burned there. So after those two events, I was like, yeah, I'm really just gonna stick to Lions. So basically just trait flipped Lions and became like the highest volume guy in that collection. And at the time they were doing some serious volume. They were like up there in the top 10 or 20 like every week in terms of volume. And I was just capturing the margins between what people were selling their rare traits for and what rare traits actually sold for. Like people who wanted quick sales versus people who versus what you could get if you were a little more patient. And I just played that game and learned, figured that out, the inefficiencies of the NFT market at the time, and just hundreds of trades, hundreds of hours every day. I was working from home, so I got to commit a lot of time, and yeah, just compounded the bankroll from there. Eventually moved to Mutants, eventually moved to Moonbirds, Apes, and yeah, that's the gist of it.
Well, and there's a couple things that I wanted to talk about this because I find a lot of this to be very interesting because you see a lot of times in the NFT space, there's a lot of people, especially from a trading perspective, right? Like, they get their alpha from like Twitter, from like a group, or like, they want an alpha caller or somebody to be like, this upcoming project, get in while it's hype. Make sure you get out before it dumps because, like, for the most part, almost every NFT collection, if you look at their chart, it's a nice pump and then everything just kind of falls off over time and people forget about it. And instead it's like, you said, hey, I want to stick with one collection, learn, because this is a big thing with Bored Apes and maybe a couple other collections, but there are specific traits in certain collections that are more sought after than others because there's times when people will be like, oh dude, like my whatever has like a rare necklace, and the floor for the necklace is this, but it's just like necklaces may not be like a sought after trait opposed to something like laser eyes, right? So those are things where obviously it depends from collection to collection, but what you essentially did is you were like, I'm just going to stick with this one project and I'm going to provide liquidity by buying people out that are trying to sell rare NFTs for like a lower price, and then you're willing to take on the risk of saying like, okay, like I know that this trade is worth more. Is that right?
Yeah, pretty much that's the gist of it. I acted as a liquidity provider for an e-liquid like JPEG for e-liquid JPEGs. That's it. People are willing to shave off a couple $100 to get out quick versus like leaving it up there and risking the floor going down. Or yeah, because like when it comes to NFTs, you typically can't just hit a sell button. Like you can accept the highest offer, but that's your only way out if you want the money like right then and there. So as long as I could beat those bot offers, I could get good deals and then stay a little more patient and get a bigger sale. And it also helps like if you're able to really, if you're like watching the market all the time like I was, you're able to tell like you can look at any of the 10,000 pieces in a collection and be like, okay, I know what this would sell for like within a day or two, like given the current, given the way the current where the market is currently at. So that was the game that I was playing, and the hardest part was staying disciplined and not like venturing off into other collections because like as you know, like during that time in the fall, like 2021 and early 2022, like collections were popping up left and right, and um like every day there was a new high, like hot mint to jump on that everyone on Twitter was talking about. And that was the hard part for me, was like just ignore that stuff, like ignore the 100x's that people are getting and just focus on the little small gains, like baby steps. And you don't have to worry about taking an elevator down like a lot of these guys who are minting, like mass minting things are. So that was the strategy. It's not as sexy as like hopping from mint to mint and looking for the next 100 200x, but it was working and I stuck to it, and I'm glad I did.
Yeah. So you were, I mean, because this is what it is, right? Like you were able to turn a very small amount of capital working from home and then got into certain collections and you said, all right, like I now know how to trade this collection. And you were able to turn that small amount of capital into whatever it was, like you said, 80, on this tweet, or like, something like 150 ETH. So it's like, I mean, you started low, and it's not like, I mean, because at the end of the day, like some of this comes to luck, but it's like, you essentially worked by trading up into these, like just whatever it was, like, you traded up and then you're like, okay, now I have, a ton of capital. So, obviously there came a point when Lazy Lions, they, whatever it is, like, their community started to, not be as like sought after. There was less volume or whatever. So there obviously came a certain point when you said like, okay, like, I'm going to move on from Lazy Lions. I have capital, where do I go now?
100%, yeah. And I think I said I did Lazy Lions until like 80 ETH, but I'm thinking in current ETH prices, so I'm probably wrong on that. ETH was like 3 or 4,000 at the time, so I think I got to like 40 ETH on Lions, and then I was like, okay, now I'm comfortable enough to where I can move on to mutants, which were like 5 or 6 ETH at the time,
Mm-hmm.
without worrying about like getting stuck. Because one of the big things about doing this type of thing is you need to always have liquidity. Because like if you want to be able to buy the deals that pop up, like you just like it's just the name of the game. You need to have ammo to make it work. Like
Mm-hmm.
for me personally, I wasn't comfortable trading a collection if I couldn't buy like 3 or 4 of them at a like if I didn't have enough capital to buy 3 or 4 deals as they popped up at a time. Because like one of the things I learned early on in Lions, when I only had enough capital to buy 1 or 2, was like I was missing out on so much profit because like when the deals would pop up, I just couldn't buy them. So and then it would make me like rush to sell my other assets, and then I'd leave money on the table there. So that I was like, I'm not going to move on from Lions to anything else until I have enough to buy like 4 or 5 mutants. And then uh, in December, like you said, moved on from Lions because I saw less opportunity there. Luckily, like for me, I got into mutants at like 5 or 6. Obviously, that crazy run that they went on helped a lot. It helps a lot when the floor price is going up versus down for flippers. Um, and then rode mutants and eventually had enough for apes and got lucky with the moonbirds mint and went from there. A lot of fun stuff in between, but yeah.
Yeah, I hear you on that. So I guess like the next thing that I kind of wanted to go over is, things have changed a lot in the past couple months. There's a lot less liquidity. Um, kind of what you mentioned before. There's not. I mean, there is a sell button, but just because you hit sell doesn't mean like your shit's gonna sell. Because obviously you need to find a buyer. Whereas it's very different from coins, where if you buy into a coin, there's always liquidity there, and so you can just go and you can get out of it. Like if something's crashing, there's bad news. Like you need to get out. You want to move it into a different play, whatever. So things are very different than they used to be in the NFT market. And so I think that there might still be a lot of people that are here and it's like, their thing is primarily trading. And because I mean that's just what happened, right? People were here for the bull. Some people stuck around, they still believe in it. There's still money to be made. It's just a lot harder. So I guess, the questions that I would ask here are, what's your advice to people that might be trading either with, a lower amount of liquidity or just trading in general? And then I guess we could segue also into, tools, because I think that nowadays, like, there's a lot of projects that, their whole thing is like, we provide a community, alpha, and tools. And it's like you see that all over the place. There's tons and tons of tools that are dropping. And now it's like every person, every trader is sitting at their cockpit, right? And they got like, their charts and their minting bot and like, NFT nerds and like all this shit. And it's just, it's gotten to a point where it's like, okay, like everybody has this stuff. So the people that are here are kind of like locked and loaded. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah, 100%.
so yeah, I guess, kind of like give me your thoughts on that, like, whether or not you use tools. So, there's that. And then like, kind of, I know I asked like a two-parter, like, advice and then tools, but, what are your thoughts on like, all that?
So I guess as far as like advice for people working with smaller bankrolls during this time is like it's definitely a lot tougher than it was back in, fall 2021, summer 2021. But I would say like if you're trying to do the short-term flipping thing like I did, you just needed you're probably gonna have to hop from collection to collection and just play whatever's trending in terms of volume. So like a week ago it was oddities, and then there was like the rare ape pepes. Like there's opportunities there 100%, but they don't really last very long, whereas like a few months ago you could rely on one collection for like 2 3 4 months at a time, like in the 1 to 2 ETH range, whereas now it's like you need to like be really quick, like get into the collection, learn the traits, milk it as much as you can. As soon as you see that volume and liquidity is drying up, time to move on to the next. And it's just like chasing where the ETH is going pretty much without and like implementing the trait flipping thing at the same time. So you gotta be a lot quicker on your feet than you had to be like a few months ago with this strategy. And then as far as the tools thing go, so when I was doing the thing with lions and with mutants, like the only tools I used was OpenSea's listing page and like discords, like this marketplace, going into the marketplace channels and trying to find sellers, trying to find buyers, and doing deals OTC and saving on the fees in the middle. Because as you know, like the fees can range from like 5 to 10% on OpenSea, and if you can find buyers and do private deals or do them through like swapping services, you can save that 5 to 10% in the middle and then share that profit with the buyer and the seller. So that was what I was doing. As far as tools now, like you said, like there's just so much now, NFT nerds and those type of things that help you with like sniping things as soon as they're listed and mass bidding and like mass minting and stuff like that. There's tons of tools that are like that will increase your chances of success out there. But for me personally, like the way that I like came up doing this stuff was just by hawking the listings page, seeing what things were selling for, and like feeding my brain as much data as I could about whatever collection I was tracking. Obviously, there's more efficient ways to do that now with like those tools that I mentioned, but yeah, it just comes down to like being able in this specific strategy, it just comes down to being able to appraise like these luxury digital assets better than everyone else can, and obviously these new tools can really help with that.
I feel you. Yeah. And that's like all good info to have for sure, because I think everybody thinks that you just need like this, like all this stuff, like you need all these tools and everything. But like, in reality, a lot of the best trades, they do happen like over the counter, right? Like they happen in discords, they happen through, people that and I realized that you do a lot of trait deals. Like you're looking for certain traits that have like I mean, at least this is from what I know. Like I know that you play the floor, but you prefer to trade on traits than trading on the floor. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, ideally, I'd be getting good traits at the floor, so I'm doing both at the same time. But like, yeah, I think you hit it nail on the head. Like, because I'm able to because I know what like each specific trait sells for, like the desirable traits, I can I can go hunting for under fair market value for them, and then bring them back and sell them eventually when a buyer comes who's willing to pay full price, sell it to them.
I hear you. Yeah, for sure. All right, so yeah, so the next thing that we could talk about is obviously like, these tweets got a lot of interaction on them. This is BenDAO, so a lot of people may not be familiar with what BenDAO is, but it's essentially like a loaning service where you can use your NFT for collateral to then get ETH back, and then you can do whatever you want with that ETH, and then there's like a certain time that you have to then repay that loan. And you went ahead and you were given like a lot of info on this. BenDAO isn't necessarily new, and Franklin, a lot of people know him. Like he was using this a lot so that he could get more liquidity because, as we know, like he loves to trade up for apes. So you obviously, you took some time, you learned about this, and you were educating the community on it. So, what's kind of like your thought on all of this, and some info for some people that may not know too much about it, but it's just something that, I mean, I gave like a small intro to it, but what's kind of like, the long story short and like your thoughts on this?
So basically, I was like looking into lending protocols and trying to see like what my best options were, and I stumbled upon BenDAO and like read their docs. And this was like 2 or 3 weeks ago when floors were like slowly moving down, and it didn't look like there was any reason for them to go up. And I looked at like what they had in terms of uh, collateral, and I realized that a lot of these loans that were taken at like 150 ETH floor price and 40 ETH floor price for mutants were in danger of getting liquidated. Um, so I like took a deeper look, and then I realized like, holy shit, there's a lot of apes, mutants, clone X, like doodles that some of the auctions had already started when I first found it. There was like 3 or 4 mutant auctions up. There was like a ton of clone X auctions up, and a lot of them just weren't getting bids. And I was like, okay, well, if the floor price goes lower, there's going to be not only is the floor going to be lower, but there's going to be like tons of new supply out on auction on BenDAO that needs to be like purchased before we bounce back up to where we were. So I was like, okay, this is interesting. And then I read their docs, and it really looked horrible. Like their liquidation threshold, which basically means like how close the floor is to the debt that's due.
Mm-hmm.
Once it got within, I think it was 95% or it was 90%. So like when the floor fell within 90% of the debt due, um, they would start the auctions. And the problem is the minimum bid that you would have to place was 95% of the floor. So liquidators like myself weren't incentivized enough to like place a bid and lock up our WETH for a 2-day auction with only like a 5% difference to floor. The only time it would make sense is if it was a rare item. So when I saw that, I was like, okay, this is like it looks like they're about to like take on a bunch of bad debt here. So I like dug in, and like it just looked like a disaster waiting to happen, to be honest. And I like released this thread, and I think it caused like some panic in the market, and then the floor prices fell a little bit, and like there was a good amount of liquidations triggered, and eventually there was a bank run on BenDAO because like the depositors who had put their money in, because BenDAO is a peer-to-pool lending protocol, so depositors will come like dump their ETH into a pool of dump their ETH into a pool and earn interest on it, a variable interest, and borrowers can come in and take loans whenever, and the depositors can pull out their money whenever they want. Whereas with peer-to-peer, which is what I do, you have to wait for if you're a lender, you have to wait for the borrower to pay you back to get your ETH back. That's not the case with BenDAO. So basically there was a bank run, their wallet ran to zero. So like all these concerns, they turned out to be pretty valid. But what BenDAO did, and I kind of like I worked with them a little bit to like work on their liquidation thresholds and the proposals that they came up with that got voted on by their community. Um, they made some improvements in terms of liquidations that gave their depositors a little bit more reason to keep their ETH in or to deposit ETH in, because when all the ETH got drained out, their interest rates spiked to like 110%. So people who are willing to take on the risk and then we're like, okay, we don't think that Bendao is going to incur like all this bad debt. Like eventually the prices will bounce and they'll get bought up. They came in and provided liquidity, and then surely enough, like apes and mutants bounced like 10 to 12 ETH from the bottom. They got to like 65 ETH. There was tons of auctions that were about to go up, and then the prices bounced, and people deposited ETH again. They wrote up a new proposal, um, and they kind of like averted the the massive supply of NFTs that was about to be brought onto the market, um, which is great. But I think like with their new changes, basically what happened is they shortened their auctions from 48 hours to I think they're still voting on this, but it's going to be 4 to 12 hours instead of 48 hours to like create quicker liquidations and not have liquidators ETH tied up for too long, as well as lowering the liquidation threshold from 95% to, or sorry, from 90% to 85%. I think that's going to be effective tomorrow. And then every week following tomorrow, they're going to drop it another 5% until it gets to 70. So what that means is like now you just have to like now when there's debt that's within when there's an item that has debt within 70% of the floor. So like let's say you owe 70 ETH and the floor of your NFT drops to 100, you would be liquidated. So like now uh borrowers have like less of a leash, and in my opinion, like if these floors stay around where they are or if they drop a tad, like there's still going to be a bunch of liquidations that happen. Like we avoided them all happening at once in that 1 week period because of the proposals that were made and because of the balance in the floor and the liquidity that got provided. Um, I still do think that like with a 70% threshold, with where the like with prices where they're at, there's going to be a ton of there's going to be a ton of liquidation auctions.
Hmm.
How that affects the floor, I'm not entirely sure, but I mean, it's just something to be aware of because there are like, I think there's like 250 apes in Bendao. There's like 300 mutants in there. So it's just something to watch if you're someone who trades mutants and apes, or if you're someone looking to get one. Um, there is like going to be, in my opinion, there will be extra supply coming from Bendao. The current marketplaces won't be your only options during over the next month.
Well, and what's interesting about this too is that, like, I guess I could bring this up as an example, right? So let's say that I have an ape, right? And I don't have like a lot of liquidity. So, one of the things that when ETH was at 2K, right? Like if I wanted to, I could have taken a loan out on my ape and I could have taken that ETH and then I could have sold the ETH, waited for it to tank to where it is right now, like that 14, 15, like 100 mark. And then I could have bought back the ETH and then I could have paid off my loan. So it's like a way that you could have like gotten liquidity for something while also like not selling it entirely, right? Like that's
100%.
like that's something that you could
Yeah.
have done.
Yeah, definitely. And I think some people definitely did do that. But the thing is like you take on the risk of it going the other way and not being
Right.
able to pay off the loan. So like it goes both ways, but like that's definitely one of the strategies that people were using while using Bendao.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, because that was something that I was thinking a lot about when, a couple weeks ago, I was like, man, like, this bend out thing and ETH is so high, it's kind of hard to find a buyer. Like, what do you do? So, with all that being said, because I think that that was obviously something that, you've done like a lot of educating on, maybe created some of your own panic, like, through it, because obviously like a lot of people were seeing this and everybody was like, this is the end, like, whatever. And now that you've gone down this rabbit hole, right? So now you said that you played like the lender side. So this was a deal that you did today. So obviously you picked up a laser eyes ape today, deathbot skin, right? So what was the deal with this? So now you're going around and after learning about the Bendao thing, you decided that you were gonna lend out some money. And so like, how does this work, and what is like the benefit for you to be doing this? Like, I guess kind of like explain this to me in Fortnite terms,
Yeah, gotcha. So basically I have been like I'm a big proponent of peer-to-peer lending where you as a lender find someone who's looking to borrow against their asset and you set terms that you both agree on. instead of like a variable interest like Bendao has. You find a borrower, you agree to terms with the borrower, and it's just as simple as that. Either they're going to pay you back with the principal plus interest, or you're going to end up with the item that you agreed to end up with if they default. Um, so that's the basic case of it. It's like I offer you a set amount of money, as long as you pay me back the set amount of money plus the interest I set by this date. And if you don't, I'm able to go to the website that we're using and claim that NFT, and it will be in my wallet until like during that period where the loan's out. I get a promissory note, which is basically like the blockchain's way of allowing you to claim this item. The smart contract sees that you have the promissory note. It sees that the date has passed, and you're able to claim this the real version of the NFT and trade in your promissory note. So like if Lior, the guy who I loaned this ape, who I gave a loan to on this ape, isn't able to pay back the loan within 45 days, I will have a claim to that ape, and I'll be able to like actually own that ape. So that's like the basic overview of it. As far as like why I'm starting to do it and what benefits it has to me. Um, so like personally, I've gotten to the point where I've traded my way up, and I have like all this the entire time that I was trading up, I was stabling up, and I wanted to lock in these gains and not be exposed to the volatility of ETH. And at this like current moment, most of my crypto is in stable coins, and I was trying to figure out like what's a way where I can either like earn yield or like put this money to use, or to work. And I was like, well, why not try NFT lending? And that's what initially led me down the rabbit hole of NFT lending. But yeah, so then I like tested out some other peer-to-peer protocols and realized like these are super risky assets, and a lot of people aren't willing to give loans on them. So if you are willing to give loans and you are good at valuing these things, like the real value of them, um, I mean, I guess at this current moment in time, you kind of have an edge in terms of being able to set terms that work for you and that you think will be like positive expected value in the long run. Obviously, it's all new, and something horrible could happen, and NFTs could go to zero, and you could get absolutely wrecked. But for me personally, like knowing the market, knowing NFTs, and like having my views on where NFTs will be long term, um, I'm comfortable giving out these loans on various different things. Like I think it's been a week of doing this, and I've got like 20 loans out on various collections, from like chubby corns to pudgy penguins to bored apes to I have crypto punks to this like a grail ape. Like this was a $350,000 loan at 12% APR. A lot of people are like, you're out of your mind, and like I very well could be. But the thing is um so here's the thing, like a lot of people on these peer-to-peer websites, they're just like offering terms to like anonymous people. They don't know who's on the other side of that loan. They have no idea if it's a credible person. They have no idea if the person has any intentions to pay them back. So they have to like be very careful with their terms, and as a result, they usually like try to charge a high APR because of the risk that they're taking on. The way I'm doing this is I'm looking at the wallets that are listing their assets, and I'm trying to find them through Twitter. So like I'll go into their wallet, see if they have an ENS on OpenSea, or like see if they have a name, try to hunt them down on Discord or Twitter, and then like talk to them and get a feel for who they are, and like look at their transaction history. Like, have they done loans before? Have they not? Kind of like put a credit score on them, for lack of a better term.
Mhm.
Um, and then like the more solid they seem in terms of their transaction history, the more lenient I can be in terms of like terms on the loan. So like with Lior, um I don't know if you know, but he's like one of the biggest. He owns an M3 Mega Mutant. He like has a big crypto company that does like VC for crypto, and super reputable guy.
Yeah. Mega
So I
mutant.
talked to
Jeez.
him. Yeah, exactly. I talked to him, and I learned that he was like trying to get a loan, and a lot of people are like 12% APR on a 350K loan on a board ape is like pretty favorable terms to the borrower. But in my eyes, like I think there's an extremely slim chance that Lior defaults on this. And if he were to default on this in the next 45 days, I think I would make a pretty sizable profit. Um, So yeah, I mean, it's the trust factor. Like it's who you're lending to matters a lot. And that's kind of the angle I'm trying to take. I'm trying to like talk to the people who I'm lending to and get a feel for who they are versus like lending to random people and having no idea who they are because that just increases to me it increases my risk. So
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, and like it's so funny like seeing this number cuz like obviously 350 grand is a lot of money, but a floor ape was going for, 400 plus on, back in April and May. Obviously ETH was way higher, but it's just funny like cuz if you were to say like, back then, oh, there's a laser eyes for 350, I mean people would be losing their shit. So I mean, I guess it just like goes to show like how bad things have gotten recently, but it is interesting to hear you say that cuz yeah, I think that there's a lot of ways, whether you're like, launching a project, whether you're trading or whatever, to make money and obviously for you to essentially be the bank, because I mean, he even says it took out a $350,000 loan, enough to buy a new house and then some, 12% APR. So, I mean, this is no small ape by any means. Like this is definitely like a one of the most sought after. I mean, this has got to be like a top 100, top 200 ranked ape, right?
yeah, I haven't checked the ratings, but in terms of like value, I would definitely say so. Like
Yeah.
Bluebeam's bot, like yeah, I would have no issue buying that for 350,000 today. I would do that in a heartbeat.
I hear
Yeah.
you. Nah, I hear you. So yeah, I mean, I'm definitely glad to hear that and like hear your thoughts as to like why you're doing this and all of that. So I guess to shift it to a couple other things is, so you mentioned that you swapped like a lot of your bag from ETH into USDC, and obviously things are very unstable right now. The macro is really bad. And I think that a lot of people are nervous. Like people, it's funny when ETH hit 2K, everyone's like bull runs on. I just stacked up my bag, like all this kind of stuff. When in reality, like the macro kind of points to, hey, things are not as good as we think. And so, there might have been people that paid 3,000 for ETH or something like that, and now are selling their ETH because they say like, oh, like I'm trying to make sure that I don't lose even more of my investment. Maybe I can buy back lower. And so, I think that one big topic, and I actually might even move this like further up in the video because I think that it's important, but it's about like when to take profits and when to also lock in losses, right? Because I think that some people treat NFTs as like the S&P 500 or something. They're like, I'm going to buy this. I'm betting on this team. I'm betting on this. They're going to be, long-term hold, that people say that all the time. But history has shown that, long-term holding NFTs, except for Bored Apes or like CryptoPunks, hasn't necessarily been like, the best, or even both of those. Like they went through like, crazy highs, saw very, considerable lows. And so, holding some of these assets is very risky. And so I kind of wanted to hear your thoughts on, like when do you think is like, a good time to take profit? I know this is very subjective depending on the situation and everything, but we can talk about like even, this Daigaku project, which, that was a free mint. People saw it for 0.5. And then what happened? Like, it went all the way up to 17 ETH today. And I was telling people in my Discord, I'm like, look, if you bought something for 0.5, you might have sold it for 1 or 2 or 3. Like I definitely would have for sure. And people are like, oh, I could have bought that for 0.5 and sold for 17. And it's just like, you never would have bought, where you did and then like sold the literal top, like for the most part in a market like this. So, to end my rant, it's like, what do you think is, a good profit taking strategy in terms of like, when to get out of an NFT, how much to have in like ETH and USDC. And then, at what point do you realize that, sometimes like if you bought into something, you made a trade and you're just like, man, this might not be a good trade. Like when should I cut my losses and move on from this? Cause it's pretty much like a dead end. It's screwed.
So I think for everyone needs to have their plan going into a trade or like going into, an overall strategy that they take. So for me, I'm the short term, take profits as they come. Like um I'm not looking for a 5-10x. I'm looking for like a quick 10-20% gain every day, pretty much like on a trade. Um, so yeah, for me personally, it's just like I am a compulsive profit taker and I will sell like if I bought a Digi Daigaku and for point 0.5 and it went to 1, I would have been out by then. Um, it really takes like a lot of conviction and like a long-term thesis for something to for me to hold it. Like my D God, for example. I bought a few of those at 80 and I was like, my strategy going into this is that I'm not gonna look at my Solana wallet. I'm not gonna look at any of that because I feel like I believe in this team and like the way that they're able to generate hype. And I don't want to like try to sell into events or like do the trade flipping thing here. I'm just gonna hold this and hope they execute on what I think they can execute. And that strategy paid off. Like I bought my D gods for 60 ETH and yesterday they hit 600. So that was the 10x play. That was the strategy there. So like um you just need to like every trade needs you need to go in knowing what you're trying to do because like if you don't you're gonna get emotional, you're gonna be like, oh, like the floor is going up, I'm not gonna sell, and then as soon as there's a little pullback you sell, and then just like you reenact in your videos, like that's how a lot of people are when they don't have a plan. Like they freak out when it's dropping and they sell and then starts mooning again and they buy. It's because they don't have a plan. Like you have to have like you got to be cutthroat, just like, okay, I'm taking my profits, I don't care what happens next. Like if I think there's another play to be made on this collection, I'll buy back in, but like I'm not going to sit here and mope and lose my mind over like missing on a couple ETH profit or like
Yeah.
buying a little too late. So to me it just comes down to each person, what they're trying to do. Like are they trying to go for the home run play and then do a 10x and just like shoot, go for it on like 30 different projects and hope that they hit one, which makes up for the losses on the other 29? Or are they trying to be more like conservative like myself, where I'm looking to make a positive gain on every single play, like really high hit rate but smaller wins? Like so I guess it just comes down to each person's risk tolerance and strategy.
Interesting. Yeah, because like I mean, I think that a lot of times people will buy into a project, they'll be up like 2, 3x or something like that, and then they're just like, oh man, this is going to be a home run, and then liquidity dries up, things they don't go the way that they think, and you're done, and so it's just like it's funny because if for example if you minted anything over the past like 6 months, you were way better off because there were a lot of plays where you would mint something for point 0.1 and it would go to like half an ETH or an ETH. And, if you were to, and this is of course like in retrospect, so it's easy to say this, but like if you were to mint something and sell it immediately and and that was your strategy, you probably would have come up a whole lot more. You would have more profit than if you were to have minted stuff and bag held all of it, hoping for, one of those to like 10x or 100x. And even then, like your strategy may not have even included taking that profit even at that point. So, in retrospect, of course, like it's easy to say this, but like, any sort of trading that you did from, October up until like, maybe May, your best bet was like, if you minted something, or even if you made a play on secondary, like if you made profit, immediately swap it into USDC. And then, you kind of move on to the next thing. Like, even if it's something where it's like you're making 0.5 or like one ETH or something. And so it's interesting to hear you say that. And there is like, a very weird connotation against people that take profit. You see this in Discords all the time. People are sell shaming. They're like, you papered, like, see at 10 ETH, loser. You know what I mean? And it's like, you see that all the time where people, they try to like do this thing where they make people feel bad about selling a project because they're just like, oh, people are creating sell pressure on like their bags. And then, people will get ridiculed like that. I've seen that a ton of times, and people are like, man, you're such a paper and like all this kind of stuff. And I think that kind of goes obviously towards like the very toxic nature of NFTs. But, what's like your take on that whole thing? Like, in terms of people that are in Discords and just like on Twitter that are just like, oh man, like, if you don't sell now because you're going to miss out on like insane gains. And, they try to like make people feel bad when in reality, it's like, my strategy may be different than yours. Right. So like, what do you think about like that whole thing?
Yeah, 100%. So like the example I'll use will be like when I was in Lazy Lions, I was an active community member in there. Like I was in their chats as much as anybody else and made a ton of friends there. And I was known as the guy who would buy and sell on the same day. And like I would have no issue undercutting the floor to get out of my trade and take my quick profit. And that would rub a lot of people the wrong way. And I kind of just in the beginning, I was like, oh, I don't want to really be active in the Discord. I don't want anyone to know who I am, like, because I'm just undercutting their floor and they're gonna get mad at me. Then I was like, I don't really give a shit. Like I'm gonna do my trading strategy, and I'm gonna be in here and be a part of this community. And if you don't like it, like, too bad. Find a better way to, like, that's just the name of the game. Like, we're both trying to, at the end of the day, we're trying to make money here, right? And connections too, I guess. But money is a driver of this space. And to get mad at someone because they have a different strategy than you, like not a long-term vision on something, is that falls on you and not really the person who has the short-term strategy. So for me personally, I would just like, I'm just going to embrace it. And like, I put, paper hands, diamond wrist in my bio, because everybody, like, the amount of times I've been called a paper hands whenever I was selling, especially in Lions. I was just like, okay, I'm just going to embrace it then. And surely enough, like, Lions ran to like 3 ETH, and everyone's like, oh, imagine if you held all of your lions. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, dude, when I started, I could afford one lion. Now I can afford, hundreds of them. So like, and then eventually they fall from 3 ETH to like 0.5. And now it's just like, dude, all those guys who've been like spending all this time and cheering
Roaring.
on the price and being like, we're going to the moon, like, they have nothing to show for it. Whereas the people who aggressively took profits, they made it out safe. And that's just the nature of this super speculative market. Like, there is no guarantee of, like, these are not, people love to say like, oh, we're early to the Apple and the Amazon of the future. It's like the chances of you hitting on that are extremely small. You're much more likely to be not buying the future Apple and Amazon. So, you know, in terms of probabilities, you're usually better off just taking your profits and moving on in a highly speculative asset. And
Yeah.
I think it's funny, like, it's just like that stigma that you're talking about, like in stocks and stuff. Imagine if you're in your friend group and you sell your Apple stock, and your buddy who works at Apple comes up, he's like, you don't believe in me anymore? Like, like it's just a whole nother dynamic. And I think it's funny because it's not a thing in traditional markets and stuff like that. So I don't know. I just think it's funny. And when people get mad about other people selling, like, my advice is just like, don't let that like mess with your head or anything. Like, do what your plan was to do when you bought the thing, and don't worry what anybody else says.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not gonna say that I haven't like experienced that whole situation where I'm just like, oh man, like, maybe I should like hold on to this thing or whatever. And you even mentioned that this space is like very speculative. It's like, for all we know, and look, I have an ape, and like, I think Yuga's dope. They have a ton of money. Their events are awesome. Obviously, we saw the thing with like Snoop Dogg and Eminem last night, which was really cool. And so people kind of look at Yuga, and they own CryptoPunks, and the most historical NFT. So obviously people feel like a certain type of way about them, where they say like, oh, they could be the leaders. And, if you think about 20 years ago, like, what was everybody using for email? AOL, dude. Does anybody use it anymore? Hell no. It's like, Google obviously came in and they cornered that market. It's like people don't even really use Yahoo anymore. And so, even though AOL at a certain point, they were very early, like all that kind of stuff, like, they eventually got taken over. And I think that it's also like very different when you talk about something like a Bored Ape, because the thing is that like, when it comes to stocks, like, sure, maybe some investors would be willing to invest $10,000, $20,000, something like that. And then you look at something like NFTs, and it's just like, these Bored Apes cost $100,000. And you can't buy like a fraction of it. It's like you either buy the whole thing or you don't. There's like one entry and there's one exit. It's not like you can like, break it up. I mean, if you wanted to fractionalize it, that's one thing. But then at that point, it's just like, it's not yours, and like, what's the point? So I think that, it's tough because you look on Twitter a lot and people are talking about like Bored Apes or CryptoPunks, and they're like, oh man, like, everyone's going to want one of these. But it's just like, at a certain point, if the floor of Bored Apes gets to $1 million, it's just like, who's going to be out there dishing $1 million for a profile picture? Like, there may be some people, but like, if you think about it like a car, right? Like, how many people are realistically buying $1 million car? Like, I don't know the answer to that, but I don't know. I guess just to spark conversation and like go off on that, it's like, I think that people kind of like take lightly to the fact that like for new people to come into the space to then spend $1 million or something on a PFP is going to be like, it's hard. That's a big chunk of change.
100%. Yeah, I agree. And as much as, and I believe in Yuga long term, and I think like they've done great, and I love the community, but it's just hard to justify the prices sometimes. So that's why I've never like held an ape or a mutant like longer than a week. Like I to me, I'm just like, it's super speculative. And can they go back to all-time highs and run through them? Sure, of course they can. But am I willing to place like hundreds of thousands of dollars on that bet? Um, when I came into the space with like $2,000 a year ago, absolutely not. Like I always go back to like, no matter how sturdy you think it is, like it can go to zero overnight. Like something can happen and it can literally go to zero. Not the chances of that happening to anything Yuga related are like slim to none. But I just keep that in the back of my mind that like this stuff is super speculative and you never know. And it's best to just take profits as you go, lock them in, and then move on to the next trade.
I hear you. Well, to kind of like sum this up, so you're when I met you, I remember when you were flipping it, you were buying apes, you were flipping them, you were finding apes that had ape coin in them, so you would just pay above floor, get the ape coin, all that kind of stuff. I remember seeing when you had Wumbo Labs like in your bio, and obviously we're looking at it now. You do a like a little, I guess you could say like a newsletter, but you also dropped a free mint of 222 passes into Wumbo Labs. So, why don't you go over this just like briefly and kind of explain like, whatever you would like to about like Wumbo Labs and like, beyond trading, like, what your plans are and what you want to do.
Sure. So what Wumbo Labs is it's basically, it started as a Web3 build studio where we were working with people who wanted to, they needed smart contract work, they needed front end work, advising, Discord stuff, um, anything related to that type of thing. We had devs that were doing the job for them, and we would work with them to kind of um, use our experience for them to have, build a successful product or a launch, or most recently we worked with Puma to do all their stuff for their NFT that's kind of rolling out right now. And so there's that side to Wumbo, and there's the other side, which was it kind of grew into Wumbo. It was this group that I had made. It was like a private group that was invite only. I was kind of like screening people before letting them in, completely free. But I started it, I think, in like February or March, because like I said, like my eyes are always on like one or two projects, so I could never keep up with like the new things that were coming out. So I was like, okay, why don't I create this Discord? And it kind of goes with what you were saying with the cell shaming stuff. Like when you're in a Discord and it's a project's Discord and everybody, it kind of turns into like an echo chamber. Everybody like has the same thoughts. They're always like,
Yep.
thinking the same way. It's like I was like, I don't love that. I kind of want to make something where we bring people from a bunch of different projects and like share the thoughts there. And when they have ideas or things that they find that are interesting, they bring them all into here. So yeah, kind of like invited people in. Like that's how I found Moonbirds. That's how, I was able to, help people mint other side and stuff like that. So eventually it grew into like 300, 400 people in there. And I was like, there's a bunch of people reaching out to like get into here, and these people who are already in here have been like super helpful over the last 2 months, and we've built like this strong community. Why don't we reward these people who have been here with like a free pass, so that they can choose whether they want to stay or not, like and through the form of an NFT. Like if the NFT comes out and there's enough demand for it for them to make some money, why not like reward them and try something new? So we launched the Wumbo Pass. It was by application only, kind of like what Utes is doing with their Ute list. But so yeah, we got like a couple thousand applicants. We accepted 222. Most of them were from the original community that I was talking about. And I'm pretty happy with how it went. We some of the things we've provided are like tools within the Discord for like trending mints and mint calendars, and we're adding a couple other bots for like alerts for sniping traits like what I do. I would love to have a tool for that. I would have loved to have a tool for that when I was coming up. So we're building that out, and then we're also leveraging our connections on the other side of our business, like the development side, to bring in whitelist spots and product access for Wumbo pass holders. So we're kind of just like building this thing out and trying a new thing. And we launched it for free because we consider it to be like our beta version.
Hmm.
We'll eventually open up applications again. It will probably won't be free. It'll probably be at like a discount to the floor. But once we have built something out where we feel like we're providing, you know, enough value to add, 20 or 30 more passes, then we'll open up applications again. But for now, the main goal is just like, what does the community want? What can we bring to everybody who's in here to make them happy? And how can we leverage our connections to actually add some value here? So that is what we're doing on that end, the overview. And yeah, I'm happy with how everything's gone so far. It's been a lot of fun and built some really cool connections. And I mean, you're in there, and it's been awesome to kind of build the friendship there and the connection there, and tons. It's kind of like that, and it's been super positive in terms of my experience. I think it's really important to have a group that you can go to where everybody can speak objectively about things in this space, projects, things that are coming up, like opportunities they see, because it pays to be early in crypto and NFTs. And the way you do that is by talking to other people who are active in the space. And that's kind of like what Wumbo's become.
For sure. Yeah. So what I'll do is I'm going to link, obviously you below Wumbo Labs, like all the info for that. Just so that people can go, they could see it, they could subscribe to your newsletter that you put out as well, if you want, right? You can get that. And so yeah, I'm gonna end up saying this a lot, but the thing is that I've wanted to keep these videos somewhat like shorter, but man, it's like when we're talking about this kind of stuff, it's just there's so much info, and like you've obviously been so successful. I mean, you turned $2,000 into I would assume like a 6 to 7, minimum, like, figure portfolio, which is crazy. And it just goes to show that like, a lot of people can do it. I think that there's like a lot of people that, are in NFTs that, they think that it's all about chasing hype. But I think that like from a trader's perspective, and you've shown this, that like, there are ways that like, if you build up capital, you get good at like a certain thing, trading a certain collection, and you just kind of go for it. Like, yeah, people might give you shit for it, but at the end of the day, like, it's kind of what you said, like, the goal, if your goal is to make profit, don't listen to what anybody else says. Just sit back at your computer, put your money where your mouth is, and flip. And like, that's what a lot of people are here for. And, if there's other people that are giving you shit for it, it's like, hey, like, they could be doing the same thing, and there's nothing wrong with it, because at the end of the day, this is a market. This is a market to make money. It's like the stock market. The difference is that these NFTs, like, the supply is so much lower than any stock or crypto or anything like that. They're micro caps, and they're swayed very easily. Because I mean, obviously, through like the whole Moonbirds thing, right? Like, they go CC0, and then the next thing Moonbirds lose like 50 to 60% of their value or whatever it was. And I actually remember even you capitalized on that situation. Like, you bought the fear and then you flipped it. And I think I remember seeing that you made like 0.6 or 0.7, within the span of like an hour, just by buying the blood of like that announcement. So, eventually, like as time goes on, you learn these things and you get like an intuition of when to buy, like when to sell, like, and all that. So yeah, like I appreciate like you coming on and like sharing your knowledge. Like I'm gonna have to find a way to cut this down a little bit, but this was awesome, and I appreciate like you taking the time today to come out and hang out and just talk about like your experience and everything. And I hope it helps somebody, for someone that may be watching. So if you are watching, make sure you drop a like and a comment on the video. Go follow Cirrus on his Twitter, Wumbo Pass, and all that kind of stuff. Do you have anything else that you want to mention before we hop off?
No, I mean, I had a ton of fun, and like you said, like talking about these things for people who are in the space is super productive, and it's always good to stay in touch with others who are active. So this was really appreciated, and I enjoyed it a lot.
For sure. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. So what we'll do is we'll hop on again soon at some point, and we'll do like a follow up. Because these videos are going to be kind of frequent on my channel, and I know you got a lot of stuff going on, but you guys will see more of Cirrus on the channel for sure. So anyway, I appreciate you guys watching. Take it easy, and I will catch you guys in the next video.